Okay, so this video is going to be for a full rundown of everything you need to know about how to bench press. Okay, it's going to be a comprehensive video. This should hopefully be the only video you ever need to watch if you want to know everything about the bench press. So firstly, I'm just going to list off the types of bench press that you can have. So there is just your standard bench press. There is a powerlifting style bench press. There is a bench press that is hypertrophy focused for the chest. There's a tricep dominant bench press. And there's also ways that we can change the height. So an incline bench press, which changes the emphasis of the part of the chest that we're trying to use. So now let's go into the technique. So the first one I'm going to show you is the technique for a powerlifting style bench press. Okay. So step one is to duck underneath the bar without hitting your head. Then I want you to make sure that the bar is rolled as far forwards in the clip as you can get it. Step two is to shuffle yourself back on the bench, okay, and have the bench, I like to get it starting in line with my chest. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my feet back and I'm going to be on the balls of my feet, okay? From there, my grip is going to be as wide as that when I'm at the bottom of the rep, my forearm is perpendicular to the floor. It's pointing up. So when you do your reps, have a look and see if your forearm's collapsing in or collapsing out. If it's collapsing in, then you need to go wider. If it's collapsing out, you need to come narrower, okay? So then from there, once you found your grip, I want you to then bring your chest and your up to the sky and your shoulder blades back and down into the bench so that now the bench is now in line, the bar is in line with my mouth. Okay, from there, we're unracking with a big breath and then controlling down to the part of our chest that is highest towards the ceiling. So controlling down, pushing through our feet to drive it back up, okay? Now, ideally, if you don't have like any heart problems or something, when you're doing a set of, even if it's like 10, 15 reps, ideally, we want to do this in one big breath. Now, the reason for this is that every time I exhale, that is just gonna pull me ever so slightly out of position. So if I can manage to do as many reps as I can in one breath, that's gonna keep me in position as strictly as possible. Now, also when it comes to powerlifting, there are some rules, and this depends on the federation and the competition that you're in. Some federations want you to have your feet flat on the floor. So it's good to practice both, having your feet flat on the floor and on the balls of your feet. But if you're not doing it as part of a federation and part of an official lift, then I would suggest being on the balls of your feet, because what that does is that helps activate hip extension. And that's why I shuffle myself as far back on that bench as I really can and then set up my feet, because then it's going to really exaggerate that hip extension and me being on the balls of my feet. And when I push through my feet, I'm driving the heels down towards the ground, okay? Driving the heels down towards the ground as I'm trying to lift that bar up, okay? And the other thing you can slightly adjust is, so I said to have your forearms perpendicular. That's a very good place to like try and be and start at. But you can, when you're doing powerlifting, actually go a little wider, and that just like shortens the range of motion. So in theory, you can lift a little bit more, but you might just have to get used to that a couple times first. All right, so that is pretty much everything you need to know about your powerlifting style bench press. Now let's quickly go through how to bench press if your goal is chest hypertrophy. So this is for the bodybuilders out there that don't necessarily care about the weight going crazy high and want to just work on their chest development. So the key things we're going to change to this. Everything's kind of the same. There's just a couple elements that we're going to change. So I don't want you to exaggerate that hip extension, okay? Just get your feet comfortably flat on the floor, and we're still going to push through our feet, but just get them in a comfortable position where we're not really exaggerating that hip extension. I still want you to push your chest to the ceiling, okay? Because that's going to help stretch our chest. And then the thing I want you to focus on is going to be down to where your elbows finish. So what I want is my elbows to flare more. If I tuck my elbows in, that's going to work a little bit more tricep. Whereas if I flare my elbows out, that's going to help stretch the chest. Because you've got to think the chest attaches from the sternum and the clavicle across to the humerus here. So if I'm coming down into this position, it's stretching more and more. Okay? So when I do the bench, is same again, big breath at the top. And now we're just focusing on our elbows coming wider till I feel a big stretch in the chest and then driving up, okay? The other thing you can do for this as well is in terms of your tempo, on the way down, you can keep this down to like 1, 2, maybe 3 seconds tops. Whereas with powerlifting, sometimes you want to go a little faster to get through those reps. But yes, if we're focusing on hypertrophy, I would say 2 to 3 seconds on the way down, elbows flared. Okay, so that's your chest biased hypertrophy. Now, if we want to go on the other side of things and do a tricep dominant exercise, we're going to do a narrow grip. So, or a close grip. So same position, but now instead of my hands being all the way to the outside of the bar, I want to bring them in as close as I can really get them. And then this is going to make it a little bit more tricep dominant. So if I go through a rep, everything's the same. Big breath, coming to the same point, but you notice my elbows are flexing a lot more compared to the other lift and then driving up from there. That is going to be a lot more tricep dominant. So those are 2 ways that if your goal is tricep hypertrophy, you can do a close grip. And if your goal is chest hypertrophy, you can do a wider grip with elbows flared. So just think for triceps, elbows tucked in, for chest, elbows flared. And then lastly, I'm not going to show you through the exercise itself, but what you can do is you can raise the chair, the bench to be higher and higher. And basically what that means is the higher you go, the harder it's going to end up being. So make sure you adjust the weight accordingly, but you're basically just slowly changing where the emphasis is. So let's say when I do my flat bench, emphasis is here. As I start to increase the height, it's then coming up higher, 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 until eventually, obviously, we're vertical and we're working just our front delts. Okay, so the higher you go, the harder it's going to be. So adjust the weight accordingly, but everything else essentially stays the same. Okay, feet flat on the floor. I would say use the same technique as you did for your hypertrophy, your chest hypertrophy focused bench press. That's how I perform the incline bench. But the technique is the exact same as the hypertrophy focused bench press. So now the other thing I want to mention comes more specifically to the grip. So I mentioned about going wider and narrower and what that does, but I also want to mention how the bar sits in your hand. So what you got to think is you have in your forearm, you have the radius and the ulnar, okay? And those connect to these parts of your palm here, all right? So often you'll see people do what's called a suicide grip, okay? And so what that is that when I do my rep, I'm getting the bar to rest on those 2 points of my palm, okay? And then I'm not wrapping my thumb over, so I'm in that position there. And so now, the reason why it's called a suicide grip, so it's on the most, like the strongest part of my wrist and my forearm as I'm coming down. But the reason it's called a suicide grip is because you don't have your thumb wrapped underneath to protect it from falling out. So you would only ever do that if you're using a weight you're super, super comfortable with and that you know isn't just going to fall out of your hands, because it is quite a risky maneuver to do. However, when we come to do powerlifting, we obviously want to be in as strong a position as possible. So we want to try and utilize where our radius and our ulnar sit. So to do that, we're going to do something called a bulldog grip. Okay, and the reason it's called a bulldog grip is if you've ever seen a bulldog before, they walk kind of like with their hands rotated in. So I want you to think about the same thing. When it comes to powerlifting, I want you to think about the same grip. So when I get into position, I do the same way that I initially was doing with the powerlifting technique to begin with, but then I'm going to think about rotating my palms in so that now it's resting on this part of my palm here, okay? So instead of my wrist pointing straight up, I'm now rotating in so it's sitting on that part of the palm, and now I'm going to do my bench press. My thumb's still wrapped around, but I kind of get the best of both worlds. I get the safety of having my thumb wrapped around, and I get the benefit of getting the bar to rest on these 2 key pivot points here. Okay, this is where, again, the radius and the ulnar kind of meet. All right. So now finally, let's talk about how I would program this. So let's assume that my goal is for the weight to be going up as high as possible. Okay, my goal is strength. What I would suggest is your first couple sessions is something like a 5x5, okay? So that is 5 sets of 5 reps. Now, once you get like quite experienced with bench pressing,
you're always tempted to try and put as much weight on that bar as you can manage for 5 reps, but I wouldn't suggest doing that, okay? We want to see progress, and if we're bench pressing maximum every single time, like our top weight, you're probably going to find that you hit a plateau. So let's assume, I think in my head, I can do a 100, let's make it a round number, 100 kilo bench press, okay, for 5 reps. That's my goal, is 100 kilos for 5 reps. I would say week 1, you're going to want to start at, let's say, 80, 85 kilos, okay, for 5 reps. Now, it's going to feel like you have reps in reserve, and that's okay, okay? The first week, I want you to think about getting, if you've ever heard of it, a 7 out of 10 RIR, which is reps in reserve. So I have 3 reps in reserve on the first week. So I want to aim for like 3, maybe even 4 reps in reserve. Then the next week, we're going to go up to, if we started at 85, let's go up to 90. Next week is 90. So again, we're getting closer. Maybe we're like more towards 2 reps in reserve. Then the week after that, we're going to go for 95. And then on the fourth week, we're going to go for that 100. The goal that I had of 100, okay, for 5 reps. And if I hit that, same thing. Now I want to think, okay, can I do 105 on this? Now you could try that the next week, okay, if you felt confident, but you could do the same process. And now instead of starting at 85 kilos, I'll start at 90 kilos, and then 95, 100, and then 105. And that way you like periodizing like that. If you ever heard the word periodizing, that's what you would do for like top level athletes, is not trying to force them to go maximum every single session. You'll actually start a little bit lower and slowly progress until like if they have a powerlifting meet, let's say they have a competition, is you do the same thing. You'd start a bit lower, and then on the powerlifting day, that 4th week, for example, if you're doing in 4-week blocks, 4th week, you go into, you're going to be going into the powerlifting competition. So that's where you're going to aim for your top reps. Now, the other thing that you need to consider in terms of the reps that you do. So I said 5x5 is a good way to do it, okay? 5x5 training. But you can go as low as testing your 1 rep max. Obviously, you probably need a spotter to do that. But you can do like 3 reps as well. So consider 5 reps a sweet spot for hypertrophy and strength, okay? It's a little bit more strength biased because obviously we're trying to get the weights to go up. But then I want you to think about max strength. So max strength would be anything less than like 3 reps. So you're looking 1, 2, 3 reps is going to be towards your max strength. So you're not necessarily making the muscle get bigger, but you're teaching your body to handle that heavier and heavier load. Okay, and you can do the same thing. You can do 5 reps of 3, or you could even do 3 reps of 3. But it's up to you, and it's obviously a bit time dependent. But that's how I program the sets and reps. Now, when it comes to the rest, when we're training for strength, it is super, super important that you have rested long enough. Minimum for me, I would suggest being 5 minutes. If you don't have the time, then maybe 3 is like the lowest I would go, but I would suggest 5 minutes. And honestly, if you have time, rest even longer than that. I often rest up to like 8 minutes. I want you to go into every single set that you do feeling confident that you've rested long enough that you can perform the same amount of reps. So your goal reps, which is 5 reps, if I'm doing my 100 kilos, every single set, I want to be trying to get to that 5 reps, okay? Now, let's go on the flip side of things, and we're going for hypertrophy. How would I program for hypertrophy? So if I'm doing a bunch of other exercises, which often I am doing with hypertrophy, I would probably do a push movement with a pull movement, because I'm trying to increase the volume rather than the intensity. I'm trying to increase the volume, the amount that I'm doing. So I would suggest only doing maybe 3 sets. You could still do 5 if you're trying to also just improve the bench press. You could do 5, but obviously if you're doing 5 sets of that, it might mean that you can't do as many sets of like chest flies or incline bench or whatever it may be. But let's assume that you're going to go for 3 sets. I would say then your minimum reps is going to be 5. Okay, 5 is like your minimum, but I would honestly aim like closer towards 8 to 10. That's kind of the sweet spot for me. So whatever you can do for 8 to 10, and pretty much with that, every single session, I want to be like working as like close to failure as I can. Every session. So if I know that I can do 100 kilos for 8 reps, every session is 100 kilos. We're not going to necessarily periodize in such a way that we're starting a little less and then building up. I would suggest finding that weight that you can manage for 8 reps, and then just even slowly increasing that by like 1 kilo at a time. So first week, maybe I do 100 kilos. If I manage the 8 reps, then I'll try 101. But the caveat to this is that the rest is going to be shorter as well. So maybe the rest, I would still suggest trying to aim towards like 2 minutes. But if you don't have time for it and you want to increase the volume, maybe it's as low as 30 seconds or like 30 seconds between your superset. Because so chances are that if you're trying to do hypertrophy training, you're going to do a bench press and then follow that with maybe pull-ups, for example, or lat pull down. So you rest 30 seconds after your bench press, then into your lat pull down. So what that will mean is, because we're not resting like we are with strength with 5 to 8 minutes, is it means that you're not going to be fully recovered every single time you come into that set. So when I first do my 100 kilos, I'm doing it for 8 reps. The next set is very unlikely that I'm going to be getting to 8 reps. In fact, it's probably going to be more like 6 or 7. So I would suggest try and aim for the higher rep range with your first set, so like the 10, and then watch it slowly drop off for the next 2 sets. And that's okay. Like, you're still achieving hypertrophy as long as you're getting close to failure. So that's how I program for hypertrophy. But hopefully this video has given you a full summary of how to do bench presses and you feel confident now programming it and doing the technique going forwards. So good luck when you try it.